welcome to my class. My name is Budhram, also known as Rishi, my middle name. And today we're going to be talking about Hinduism and the Indian diaspora in the West Indies. So, before we begin, I'd like to take a brief moment to have some quiet time because before you start any sort of religious function, in my tradition of growing up in the Caribbean, you always pay obeisance to Lord Ganesh, the elephant-headed god, Mother Saraswati, who is the goddess of learning in Hinduism, and you also pay obeisance to your guru. So let's all take a short moment to recite any sort of prayer or salutation that we like. Thank you. Okay, so here's my first lesson. The term Hinduism isn't actually a correct term to use, and we're going to be discussing the usage of language, but a better term to use is Sanatan Dharma, or the everlasting truth or duty. So we'll be discussing that. But before we begin with my formal presentation, we're going to have a message from Pandit or priest Persad, who was one of the stalwarts of his time in Guyana in terms of promoting Indian culture. And we're going to hear a short message from him from one of his discourses.
I love my town. I remain and will remain unshaken in it. Nothing can move me away from the very fabric and foundation of this great heritage to which I belong. I remain in it and I serve in it with pride, with dignity, with confidence, and shares the faith that this town will continue, not only within the borders of Guyana, but in every other corner of the world. As we look in the year 2004, the percentage of people who serve Sanatan Dharma, who work for Sanatan Dharma, has not decreased. But not only percentage I look at and numbers, but in reality, there has never been the involvement in such a positive way of so many young people ever before. And I speak with at least 50 years of experience. I know what the Mandirs were 50 years ago. I remember them in the Lordji days. And you will not forget, as I will not forget, that in the past, people believed that the Mandirs were for the older folks. But we've seen as time marches on that you can hardly find aged and senior citizens within the walls of the Mandir in any corner of this country and even in North America. All our Mandirs are now fully occupied by children and young people. And I want to join with Chandra in congratulating all those who have been working with the young people. Last night, I raised the...
Okay, so Pandit Persad unfortunately passed away earlier in this decade. However, his legacy is still upkept. And the reason I showed that video to you is to give you a nice introduction as to explain my motive for teaching this class, and also to present to you the pride and the strength and heritage that Pandit Persad, as well as other priests all around the Caribbean, all across different parts of the world, in Mauritius, in Africa, in India, in Southeast Asia, in Canada, and in America. And I want to let everyone know that as a Hindu, I feel pride. And I feel pride from learning from him and also from a lot of different people. He used some terms that we're going to talk about, such as Sanatan Dharma, Logi, Mandir, and I'm going to try my very best to give you a brief survey of all of that today. Let's continue with my presentation. Okay, so I'm presenting a subject that is very difficult to explain, because religion is something that's very subjective and very difficult to be objective. We all have different viewpoints about it. So I'd like to read this paragraph to explain, this difference between practitioner and scholar approach. I feel like Kim Nath, a scholar of Hinduism who wrote a book for Oxford University, gave a great insight and clarification. She says, in fact, each book on Hinduism differs as a result of the background and viewpoints of its author. Some Hindu writers may be ardent practitioners or devotees. Others may consider religion to be of little personal importance. Equally, for some non-Hindus, a religious commitment, a beat to another religion, may strongly inform their scholarship. Whereas for others, the attempt to leave personal religious beliefs on one side is thought of being an important starting point. In the past, many Western scholars believed it was possible to provide a wholly accurate and objective account of Hinduism in the manner of natural sciences, observing and recording data. Today, most scholars of religion, like those in some other branches of scientific inquiry, concede that personal differences do have an impact on research and writing. What scholars choose to include or exclude in their books, what examples they give, and how they organize their material are all subjective decisions. The reason I include this at the beginning of my presentation is to say that what I'm going to present to you is based off of my knowledge and my background and my experiences. It is not going to be a definite explanation of the religion, but rather I'm going to share my culture and my heritage, my background with you all. So, in Hinduism, we have many sampradayas, which can be loosely translated as traditions in English. And those traditions all differ based on these different, how I should say, different sampradayas. Or guru or spiritual teacher lineages. For example, I am initiated with the Brahmrishi Sampradaya, which is based on the teachings of the great sage Ramananda, and I am formally a part of that. However, I grew up with a lot of exposure to the Chinmaya mission, which is a tradition that can be summarized as the teachings of Sri Adi Shankaracharya, who promoted a worship that is practiced in Hinduism in the Caribbean today and elsewhere in the world. We also have the Satya Sai Baba and Sai Baba traditions, which are based on the teachings of two very prominent figures who are seen as sages in parts of India and all around the world. Satya Sai Baba, who is here in this picture, and also Satya Sai Baba, who I'll show a picture of later. Also, there's other traditions such as the Baps, Swami Narayan, which is present in this part of North Carolina and around the world, such as in Atlanta and Canada. They have very beautiful temples based on the teachings of Swami Narayana, or this great sage Narayana. We have the ISKCON group, the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, which is also, sometimes referred to as the Hare Krishna group, which are the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, this great devotee or this great follower of Lord Krishna. And we also have others. Now, you've noticed a lot of been using some words that are not English. Some are Sanskrit, some are Bhojpuri, Hindi, Awadhi, lots of different languages that are from India. And the problem that I'm going to have with this class is that I am going to translate them based on what I know. And for example, with Sanskrit, which can be equated to Latin, and Latin of the eastern part of the world, Sanskrit can be translated in lots of different ways and has a totally different sentence structure and totally different grammar and diction, conjugations, all those great, parts of language. So some words that I might use could be translated in different ways. And that's the same with other languages such as Hindi, Bhojpuri, or Awadhi. And also, I am not a trained scholar or a formally trained practitioner or proficient in any of the languages stated above. I'm not even proficient in English. So, please forgive me for speaking out of turn. I do not mean to offend or hurt anyone, and if you have any questions or comments or concerns, please feel free to address them with me. So, I grew up in Miami, Florida. My family's from Guyana. My dad grew up in a very religious household. My father is actually a disciple of the late Pandit Sharma, who is part of this great lineage of Pandits or Hindu priests in Guyana. And my father was also a member of the Grove and Diamonds, which refers to the village, part of Guyana where he's from, Ramayan Gold, which refers to this group of people who would travel and sing the praises of Lord Rama in the Ramayana, written by Goswami or sage Valmiki in Sanskrit, and the more popular version of the Ramayana is written by the sage Goswami Tulsidas, who's also a part of my guru lineage of the Ramananda Sampradaya. He was also a classmate of the late and great Sri Prakashananda, who is one of the greatest orators and greatest symbols of promoting West Indian and especially Guyanese Hinduism. He unfortunately passed away too young, in my opinion, in 2009, but his legacy still goes, and we're going to see a little bit about him in this presentation. Also growing up, I attended the Sri Lakshminarayan Mandir in Miami, and it's under the head of Pandit Chidghanand, who I learned a lot from, who taught me a lot about, learning mantras or prayers and, his interpretations of the text. I also grew up as a very devoted member of the complementary Bhavihar group, or youth group, which was, head by Lakshmi Dubey, or Lakshmi Sharma. I refer to her as Auntie Lakshmi because she is the one who introduced me at a young age to religion and taught me a lot of what I know. And, I continued going to that temple, and then when I came to North Carolina and started school, I began listening to lectures and spiritual songs or bhajans by Pandit Abhedanand Persad Sharma of Trinidad, lectures by Swami Prakashananda, who is part of Chinmaya mission. Actually, Pandit Abhedanand as well is part of Chinmaya mission. Swami Prakashananda is a sage in Trinidad who travels teaching as part of his, mission or his lineage all around the Caribbean and around the world about Hinduism. And also listening to Sri Prakash Desai Ji, who I spoke about earlier. Okay, so from listening to all of these lectures and discourses, I myself began to learn, these mantras and prayers that we say, and I'm a self-taught Hindu priest. And I also learned from reading and having one of Ripu Daman Prasad's books, which is known as Pratana Satsang, and he explains all of how to do rituals that are, practiced in the Caribbean, still up to this day, and it's a book that's used by many pandits and spiritual aspirants in order to help them understand how to do rituals in a way in which I do them today. I joined the Hindu Yuva, or the Hindu Club, here on campus at UNC, and work with the executive board, as well as a Hindu chaplain here by the name of Madhu Sharma. I've done a few talks, and I've even, done some pujas or rituals based on my traditions for some Hindu holidays and festivals. I was recently initiated this past year with the Ramananda Sampradaya, and actually my guru and my spiritual teacher, he is Swami Chidghanand. He is a very, very great and very learned sage, and he gave me a great summary of this, of my heritage, and he's taught me a lot in the short amount of time I've known him. And you also see some pictures of him and some of my initiation with him. I've also been mentored by Pandit Neil Dave Persad, who is a priest from Trinidad who now resides in South Florida. He's helped me a lot with being a priest. And also, here at UNC, I've been very fortunate to have taken classes with Dr. Pamela Lodes Beach, PhD, and Dr. Lisa Lindsay. And also, I'm currently taking a class with Dr. Harshita Kama, all about, Hinduism, or, the African diaspora, or, about their research interests, which center around what I'm going to talk about today. Okay, so let's go all aboard. This is a Guyana boat. So we're going to take this boat and let's go to India first. This is a cool boat because it's a time traveling boat, so it's going to take us back in time. So the first stop is the Indus Valley civilization. So we're looking at thousands and thousands of years ago, and what I'm going to talk to you about is, scholars' early interpretation of how, my faith arose. So, one thing that you learn in a lot of world history classes is that a lot of these early civilizations are close to waters, great bodies of water. For example, the Egyptians, they were close to the Nile River, and for this example, we see that we have groups of people that live close to the Indus Valley River. And we have certain areas such as Harappa and Mohenjo-daro that are close to these rivers, and scholars, I say we, but I mean scholars, have tried their best through archaeology and sociology and history to explain these cultures. So here's an example of a city that was excavated. We see a lot of great architecture and a lot of great things that can help us explain why there are many Hindu practices. Once we look closely. Also, we see a lot of iconography. So one very important thing that we're going to have to talk about today is symbolism behind Hinduism. A lot of people don't have the background to understand, why, all of these gods and goddesses are depicted in such ways. For example, in this case here, they have larger breasts or, huge eyes. This figure here is the temple king. And, we're even going to discuss that with a lot of the deities that are a part of Sanatana Dharma. And please forgive me if I use Hinduism. I do apologize. Okay, so like I said, we don't know for sure what happened. One theory is that we had a group of people who were of, some say the Middle East, known as the Aryans. Let me write that down. The Aryans who moved down, migrated down this valley and were able to, meet and live with the people of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Migrated down, to summarize, we keep saying we, but scholars, saw the usage of, many temple rites, rituals, and also they noticed a text that was similar to Sanskrit that actually can't really be deciphered. So that's why they're concluded that that's one way Hinduism arises. Okay, so one issue that scholars have with Hinduism, in terms of describing it, being objective, is that there's different traditions, as I discussed, and there are also different ways of telling the same story, per se, for lack of better words. So, we have the term Shruti, which refers to what the rishis or sages heard, not me, even though people know me as Rishi, not me, but what these rishis or sages heard by divine revelations, and they passed down to the guru lineages or the sampradayas, right? And we also have Smriti, which refers to sacred narratives. I don't like to use the word stories, but it was a way of telling history in this part of the world that we're looking at, of South Asia, and it continued to flourish with the movement of people. Okay, so I'm going to skip a lot of history for lack of time, and I am going to talk about the different deities that we worship, the ways in which we worship them, and I'm not going to use a PowerPoint presentation. I have lots of other things to use, so please bear with me. I'll try my best to explain as best as I can. So, before we begin, let's go to Trinidad now. Let's go back on our boat. Let's time travel to last year in Trinidad and Tobago, which is located right in the Atlantic, close to Guyana and Venezuela, that area right here. And we're gonna learn from Pandit Abhedanand Persad Sharma about generally how Hindus or Sanatan Dharmas view the concept of God.
Satiji Mahadev. You take the same mud and you shape it into a small little, and you put it like that. Ocean is a huge mass of water. Why would we argue? Like that. Sri Ram is the Lord. Bhagwan Shiva is God. They are all made of Sat Chit Ananda. And you know what, my friends? You and I are the surf, and you and I are the bubbles, and you and I are the ripples. Every one of us have a different name. We have a different shape. We have a different size. We have a different name. That's why. Look at the mud. You take the mud and you put it in a spinning wheel, and you put your hands while the mud is wet, and you shape it into a Khalsa, and you gave the mud now the name Khalsa. You gave the name Khalsa to the mud. Then you take the same mud and you shape it in the form of a flat plate, and you give the name what? Alright. You take the same mud and you shape it into a small little Diya. You gave the mud the name Diya. Then you take the same mud and you shape it into another flat plate, a little bigger one. And what do you call it? The rusty flour put inside of it. Yeah, that. Saucer. You take the saucer, the mud, and you make it like a saucer, and then you make another flower pot, a flower pot made out of the same mud, and you put the flower pot inside the saucer so that when you water the plant, the water will go through the saucer and not wet up the place. Everything has a different name. Everything has a different shape. Everything has a different size. Everything has a different weight. My friends, but they are all made out of mud. That is the punchline. They are all made out of mud. In the same way, you and I, we have a different name, we have a different size, we have a different shape, we have a different color. Our skin might be feeling different. Some of us are fair, some of us are not so fair. Some of us are tall, some of us are not so tall. Some of us we're just different from each other. But we are all made out of the same entity called as Sat Chit Ananda. That is at a subtle level. From a physical level, cut me and cut you and see what we get. Skin, same. Blood inside. Veins, same arteries, same kidneys, same liver, same pancreas, same organs, same everything. Friends, we are all made with the same product, with the same, what you call, the same elements. Akash, Vayu, Agni, Jal, Prithvi. We all made of with the five Panchamahabhuta, I just call, the five elements. We all have blood inside of us. Friends, we are all made out of Sat, Chit and Ananda.
Okay. Thank you, Pandit Abhedanand. I consider him like a guru or a spiritual teacher because he's taught me a lot about the religion, and I'm very grateful and appreciative for having him in my life. So, use some words that you might not be familiar with unless you're of a Caribbean background. So I'm going to talk about that. address that. So, items such as the diya or the kalsa or parai are all things that are used in worship, in rituals. The kalsa is like a huge, vase or round bottom container. The parai is, a Trinidadian word, I believe, for a dish. And the diya is a small little cup that's used for worship as well. Okay, so mud, as we just might have noticed, was discussed, and as we just saw in our little examination of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, there was lots of mud there. So what did the people use? They used what they had. They used the mud, right? So another thing he talked about was Sat, Chit, and Ananda. So Sat is a Sanskrit word that can be loosely translated as truth. Chit refers to consciousness. And Ananda can be loosely referred to as bliss. So, my slide here is a scene that was depicted from the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of these texts here that I'm going to be talking about a little bit of. But in this text, Krishna, who is an incarnation or a form of Vishnu, the God here, one of the Hindu gods, the forms of gods, he is counseling Arjuna, who's a warrior. I'll write it down, Arjuna. I am going to be running all over the place and explaining stuff, so you're going to have to, follow me as I go, because I'll be writing on the board, PowerPoint. I have all these books here, all these different things that I want to use to explain. So it's going to be an interactive experience. So this scene here is from the Bhagavad Gita. Now, the Bhagavad Gita, many people believe it is considered the quote Bible of Hinduism. However, that's not an incorrect way to explain the Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is, as I like to think of it as, a mind management manual. And that's a term that's been used by another Hindu priest from Guyana named Pandit Rajan, who we'll be looking at a little bit later. So, to give some background, the reason why Krishna is at a battlefield, and you see here that there's a ton of armies and warriors, is that there was a conflict between two sets of cousins. One was known as the Kauravas, and another one was referred to as the Pandavas. Okay? So we have the Kauravas. Please excuse me for my pronunciation and my writing. It's not totally correct in English. Okay, so we have these two sets of cousins who are fighting over the throne of Hastinapur, right? So, there's actually a true event, there's evidence of the battlefield. So the Kauravas were the quote, I'm going to have to introduce another word. They're going to talk about dharma, right? So the Pandavas were the ones who upheld Dharma, or their duty, while the Kauravas were the ones who didn't follow what they were supposed to do, and they were adharmic. So typically in Sanskrit, any word that has a in front of it is saying like not or without. So these Kauravas were without dharma. And Hindus don't really like to use the word good and bad because that's too superficial, as explained by Swami Prakashananda. So they like to look at things in terms of following what you're supposed to do versus not following what you're supposed to do. So Arjuna is this guy right here, and he looks on the opposite side of the battlefield, and what does he see? He sees his cousins, the Kauravas. He sees some of his teachers. He sees some of his family members on the opposite side, and he's supposed to fight them. Being a champion of Dharma, he should be the one to annihilate them and reestablish the righteousness of the battlefield, and to make it into a more mystical experience, to also uphold Dharma, right? Lord Krishna, and I'm sorry if I refer to him as Lord, but Krishna, he was the charioteer. He decided he's not going to fight in this war. He is an incarnation of Vishnu, one of the supreme deities in Hinduism, and he didn't want to fight. So what he did is he told the Kauravas and the Pandavas, he said, okay, Arjuna and Duryodhana, alright, Duryodhana's name down here, not Arjuna, I'm sorry for not writing that. Duryodhana was one of the leaders of the Kauravas. Arjuna, he was one of the leaders of the Pandavas, loosely speaking. And Lord Krishna gave them, the choice that one can either have Krishna to be their charioteer. Let me write Krishna down. Krishna. Or, because Krishna was at one point the king of the ancient city of Dwarka, that his army would, be with the group, with the other side. So the Kauravas had Krishna's army. So to bring it to a more theological sense, we have God versus God's army. We have one group siding with God, Krishna, and we have the other group siding with Krishna's army. So, what we'd like to discuss is that we have these two sides, and Arjuna, he should be the one to face Dharma, and to uphold Dharma. And when he sees his cousins fighting, he decides, I can't do this, and he falls into a deep depression and dejection, and doesn't want to fight anymore. So, Krishna gives him the Bhagavad Gita, he gives him a sermon, and during the sermon, he shows Arjuna his, quote, true form, or Vishvarup form. So, as Pandit Abhedanand said, that the mud that's used in rituals is the thing that's in everything. Another example is with energy. There's different types of energy, but at the end of the day, whether it be chemical, potential, mechanical, kinetic, electrical, nuclear, it's all energy. Same thing with all the different forms of gods and goddesses. And this is one of the ways the artist who drew this picture represented it as such, because we see all of the different forms of the gods and goddesses encompassed by Vishnu. And this is something that is held by many Vaishnavas, and which is why Lord Vishnu has become one of the important deities in this part of the country, in this faith, I'm sorry. So, we're gonna go into more details about that. So, the first form is Lord Ganesh. Yeah, you can pause it.